Hello Mark, this is Tim, a junior, whose student ID number is S04410006. I major in English department, and now I'm gonna do the TED Talk recording. The title is Social Experiments to Fight Poverty, and the speaker is Esther Duflo. So here it is, you can check. I'm short, I'm French, I have a pretty strong French accent. So that's going to be clearer in a moment. Maybe a sobering thought and something you all know about, and I suspect many of you gave something to the people of Haiti this year. And there is something else I believe in the back of your mind you also know. That is, every day, 25,000 children die of entirely preventable causes. That's a Haiti earthquake every 8 days. And I suspect many of you probably give something towards that problem as well. But somehow it doesn't happen with the same intensity. So why is that? Well, here is the thought experiment for you. Imagine you have a few $1,000,000 that you've raised. Maybe you are a politician in a developing country and you have a budget to spend. You want to spend it on the poor. How do you go about it? Do you believe the people who tell you that all we need to do is to spend money? That we know how to eradicate poverty. We just need to do more. Or do you believe that the people who tell you that aid is not going to help? On the contrary, it might hurt. It might exacerbate corruption, dependence, etc. Or maybe you turn to the past. After all, you have spent billions of dollars on aid. Maybe you look at the past and see, has it done any good? And sadly, we don't know, and worst of all, we will never know. And the reason is that, take Africa for example. Africans have already got a lot of aid. These are the blue bars, and the GDP in Africa is not making much progress. Okay, fine. How do you know what would have happened without the aid? Maybe it would have been much worse, or maybe it would have been better. We have no idea. We don't know what the counterfactual is. There's only one Africa. So what do you do to give the aid and hope and pray that something comes out of it? Or do you focus on your everyday life and let the earthquake every 8 days continue to happen? The thing is, if we don't know whether we are doing any good, we are not any better than the medical doctors and their leeches. Sometimes the patient gets better. Sometimes the patient dies. Is it the leeches? Is it something else? We don't know. So here are some other questions. They're smaller questions, but they are rather less small. Immunization. That's the cheapest way to save a child's life. And the world has spent a lot of money on it. The Gavi and the Gates Foundations are each pledging a lot of money towards it, and developing countries themselves have been doing a lot of effort. And yet, every year at least 25 million children do not get the immunization they should get. So this is what you call a last mile problem. The technology is there, the infrastructure is there, and yet it doesn't happen. So you have your million. How do you see your million to solve this last mile problem? And here's another question. Malaria. Malaria kills almost 900,000 people every year, most of them in sub-Saharan Africa, most of them under 5. In fact, that is the leading cause of under 5 mortality. We already know how to kill malaria, but some people come to you and say, you have your millions, How about bed nets? Bed nets are very cheap for $10. You can manufacture and ship an insecticide treated bed net and you can teach someone to use them. And not only do they protect the people who sleep on them, but they have this great contagion benefit. If half of a community sleeps under a net, the other have also benefits because the contagion of the disease spread. And yet, only a quarter of kids at risk sleep under a net. Societies should be willing to go out and subsidize the net, give them for free, or, for that matter, pay people to use them because of those contagion benefits. Not so fast, say other people. If you give the nets for free, people are not going to value them. They are not going to use them, or at least they are not going to use them as bed nets, maybe as fish nets. So what do? Do you give the nets for free to maximize coverage? Or do you make people pay in order to make sure that they really value them? How do you know? And the third question, education. Maybe that's the solution. Maybe we should send kids to school. But how do you do that? Do you hire teachers? Do you build more schools? Do you provide school lunch? How do you know? So here's the thing, I cannot answer the big question, whether aid did any good or not. But these three questions, I can answer them. It's not the Middle Ages anymore. It's the 21st century, and in the 20th century, randomized, controlled trials have revolutionized medicine by allowing us to distinguish between drugs that work and drugs that don't work. And you can do the same randomized, controlled trial for social policy. You can put social innovation to the same rigorous scientific tests that we use for drugs. And in this way, you can take the guesswork out of policy, making by knowing what works, what doesn't work and why. And I will give you some examples with those three questions. So I start with immunization. Here's a Uttar district. Rajasthan, beautiful. Well, when I started working there, about 1% of children were fully immunized. That's bad, but there are places like that. Now, it's not because the vaccines are not there. They are there and they are free. And it's not because parents do not care about their kids. The same child that is not immunized against measles. If they do get measles, parents will spend thousands of rupees to help them. So you get these empty village subcenters and crowded hospitals. So what is the problem? Well, part of the problem surely is people do not fully understand. After all, in this country as well, all sorts of myths and misconceptions go around immunization. So if that's the case, that's difficult because persuasion is really difficult. But maybe there's another problem as well. It's going from intention to action. Imagine you are a mother in a neighboring district, Rajasthan. You have to walk a few kilometers to get your kids immunized. And maybe when you get there, what you find is this. The subcenter is closed. Or you have to come back. And you are so busy and you have so many other things to do. You will always tend to postpone. And eventually it gets too late. Well, if that's the problem, then that's much easier. Because A. we can make it easy. And B, we can maybe give people a reason to act today, rather than wait till tomorrow. So these are simple ideas, but we didn't know. So let's try them. So what we did is we did a randomized controlled trial in 134 villages in Udaipur district. So the blue dots are selected randomly. We made it easy. I'll tell you how in a moment. In the red dot, we made it easy and gave people a reason to act now. The white dots are comparisons. Nothing changed. So we make it easy by organizing this monthly camp where people can get their kids immunized. And then you make it easy and give a reason to act now by adding a kilo of lentils for each immunization. A kilo of limit is tiny. It's never going to convince anybody to do something that they don't want to do. On the other hand, if your problem is you tend to postpone, then it might give you a reason to act today rather than later. So what do we find? Well, beforehand, everything is the same. That's the beauty of randomization. Afterwards, the camp, just having a camp, increases immunization from 6% to 70%. That's full immunization. That's not bad. That's a good improvement. Add the lentils and you reach to 38%. So here you've got your answer. Make it easy and make a kilo of lentils. You multiply immunization rate by 6. Now you might say, well, but it's not sustainable. We cannot keep giving lentils to people. Well, it turns out it's wrong economics because it is cheaper to give lentils than not to give them, since you have to pay for the nurse anyway. The cost per immunization ends up being cheaper if you give incentives than if you don't. How about bed nets? Should you give them for free? Or should you ask people to pay for them? So the answer hinges on the answers. So 3 simple questions. One is, if people must pay for a bed net, are you going to purchase them? The second one is, if you give bed nets for free, are people going to use them? And the third one is, the free bed nets discourage future purchase. The third one is important because if we think people get used to handouts, it might destroy markets and distribute free bed nets. Now this is a debate that has generated a lot of emotion and angry rhetoric. It's more ideological than practical, and it turns out that it's an easy question. We can know the answer to the question. We can just run and experiment. And many experiments have been run, and they all have the same result. So I'm just going to talk to you about one. And this one was in Kenya. They went around and distributed the people vouchers, discount vouchers. So people with their vouchers could get the bed net in the local pharmacy. And some people get 100% discount. And some people get 20% discount. And some people get 50% discount. And now we can see what happens. So how about the purchasing? Well, what you can see is that when people have to pay for their bed nets, the coverage rate really falls down a lot. So even with partial subsidy, $3 is still not the full cost of a bed net. And now you only have 20% of the people with the bad net. You lose the healthy immunity. That's not great. That's not great. Second thing is, how about the use? Well, the good news is people, if they have the bayonet, will use the bayonet regardless of how they got it. People who got the free bayonet 1 year later will offer the option to purchase a bayonet at $2. And people who got a free one were actually more likely to purchase the second one than people who didn't get a free one. So people do not get used to handouts. They get used to nets because we need to give them a little bit more credit. So that's for bad. So you will think, that's great. You know how to immunize kids. You know how to give bad nets. But what politicians need is a range of options. They need to know, out of all the things I could do, what is the best way to achieve my goals? So suppose your goal is to get kids into school. There are so many things you could do. You could pay for uniforms. You could eliminate fees. You could build lectures. You could give girls sanitary pads, etc. So what's the best? Well, at some level, we think all of these things should work. So is that sufficient? If we think they should work intuitively, should we go for them? Well, in business, that's certainly not the way we will go about it. Consider for example transporting goods. Before the canals were invented in Britain before the Industrial Revolution, goods used to go on horse carts, and the canals were built, and with the same horseman and the same horse, it could carry 10 times as much cargo. So should they have continued to carry the goods on the horse carts on the ground, and they would eventually get there? Well, if that had been the case, there would have been no industrial revolution. So why shouldn't we do the same with social policy? In technology, we spend so much time experimenting, fine-tuning, getting the absolute cheapest way to do something. So we aren't we doing that with social policy? Well, experiment, what you can do is answer a simple question. Suppose you have $100 to spend on various interventions. How many extra years of education do you get for your $100? Now I'm going to show you what we get with various education interventions. So the first ones are, if you want the usual suspect: hire teachers, school meals, school uniforms, scholarships. And that's not bad. For your $100, you get between 1 and 3 extra years of education. Things that don't work so well is bribing parents. Just because so many kids are already going to school that they end up spending a lot of money. And here are the most surprising results. Tell people the benefits of education. It's very cheap to do. So for every $100 you spend doing that, you get 40 extra years of education. And in places where there are worms, intestinal worms, cure the kids of their worms. And for every $100, you get almost 30 extra years of education. So this is not your intuition. Information, we need more of it, and then we need to guide policy. So now I started from a big problem, and I couldn't answer it. And I cut it into smaller questions. And I have the answer to these smaller questions. And they are good, scientific, robust answers. So let's go back to Heidi for a moment. In Heidi, a about 200,000 people died, actually a bit more by the latest estimate, and the response of the world was great. $2 billion got pillaged just this month, so that's about $10,000 per death. That doesn't sound like that much when you think about it, but if we were willing to spend $10,000 for every child under 5 who dies, that would be 90 billion per day per year just for landmen, just for that, just for that problem. And yet it doesn't happen. So why is that? Well, I think what part of the problem is that in Haiti, all of the problem is huge. Somehow we understand it. It's localized. You give your money to Doctors Without Borders. You give your money to partners in health. And they'll send in the doctors, and they'll send in a number. And their helicopter things out and in. And the problem of the poverty is not like that. So first, it's most invisible. Second, it's huge. And third, we don't know whether we are doing the right thing. There's no silver bullet. You cannot helicopter people out of poverty, and that is very frustrating. But look what we just did today. I give you 3 simple answers to 3 questions. Give lentils to immunize people. Provide free bed nets. Deworm children. With immunization or bed nets, you can save a life for $300 per life saved. With deworming, you can get an extra year of education for $3. So we cannot eradicate poverty just yet. Though we can get started, and maybe we can get started small with things that we know are effective. Here's an example of how this can be powerful. Deworming. Worms have a little bit of a problem grabbing the headlines. They are not beautiful and don't kill anybody. Yet, when a young global leader in Davos showed the numbers I gave you, they started to deworm the world. And thanks to deworm the world and the effort of many country governments and foundations, 20 million school-aged children got dewormed in 2009. And if evidence is powerful, it can prompt action. So we should get started now. It's not going to be easy. It's a very slow process. You have to keep experimenting. And sometimes ideology has to be trumped by practicality. And sometimes what works somewhere doesn't work elsewhere. So it's a slow process. But there is no other way. This economics I'm proposing is like 20th century medicine. It's a slow, deliberative process of discovery. There is no miracle cure, but modern medicine is saving millions of lives every year, and we can do the same thing. And now maybe we can go back to the bigger question that I started with at the beginning. I cannot tell you whether the aid we have spent in the past has made a difference, but can we come back here in 30 years and say, what we have done, it really promised a change for the better? I believe we can, and I hope we will. Thank you. A pause.